night that I won the NWA World's title was, I don't know how long I can hold this, but I know they can't take my name off that list. And so it's good to be, like you said, better to be former than never. To me, to be a professional wrestler, you need to be a professional. And there's a lot of parts to that. Do what you say you're going to do. Be a man of your word. You know, I mean, I've got 6 grandchildren. That's a big deal for me.
So welcome to All Angles Wrestling and to my guest today, Tim Storm. Before he gets an opportunity to explain who he is and why I'm speaking to him, I am going to have to apologize for using his least favorite word, which is former. Tim Storm is a former NWA World Heavyweight Champion, former NWA Oklahoma Heavyweight Champion, former NWA Texoma World Heavyweight Champion, former SWE Heavyweight Champion, PCW Heavyweight Champion, current 8th grade history teacher, and the voice of NWA.
I think you just told everybody everything about me. I think that's great.
Is there anything I've missed? Tell people who you are, Mr. Storm.
You know, I mean, I've got 6 grandchildren. That's a big deal for me. But you know, other than that, I think you covered what 26 years in wrestling, something like that. And yeah, no, that's good. And I've said it from the very beginning that the thing that's meant the most to me is the NWA World's Heavyweight title. So you know, like you said, you use the word I dislike, but it is what it is. I mean, you know, it's an accurate word. Former is the right word. Better
to be former than never, I suppose.
Absolutely. You know, my big feeling the night that I won the NWA World's title was, I don't know how long I can hold this, but I know they can't take my name off that list. And so it's good to be, like you said, it's better to be former than never.
Excellent. So the thing I'll start off by saying is that for me, we're recording this at 1 a.m. UK time, which is not abnormal for the previous interviews I've done as well. That's just what it takes sometimes. But Tim, you're the first person to know that there's this 6-hour time gap and that it would be 1 a.m. And taking some of your previous interviews, you've spoken to people from over here, you've spoken to people across in Australia. Both your understanding and willingness to care for my time, and the fact you've spoken to these people all over the world. How does it feel, A, to have fans worldwide, and B, to be considered one of the nicest men in wrestling?
As far as having fans worldwide, that's still kind of an interesting concept for me, to be honest with you. When you are a legitimate world's champion, that's part of it. I've got a real good friend over there that I speak to fairly often, Fiona Loughran, and that helps me keep up with the time difference. She's actually made the trip over for NWA tapings and those kind of things, so that helps me with that. I have not I've not made it all over the world. You know, I have not. I didn't defend the title. I went to Japan and Mexico and Canada, and but there's a lot of places I haven't been. But to know that there are people who care about wrestling, who care about the NWA, and who know who I am is still pretty amazing to me.
And the nicest man in wrestling part? That might just be me saying that, but
you know, that's one of those deals that I just have to leave it to everybody to make their own decision. I try to, boy, now we're getting into like life philosophy, but I just believe you treat people how you want to be treated. And you know, if it doesn't matter to me who you are, where you're at, what you've done, I just try to treat everybody the same, and that's with kindness, because I think that's what the world needs.
Good. Life philosophy is hopefully something we will get into this evening. I try to make sure that anyone I speak to, I'm giving you questions that you've not faced before. I make sure to check all the interviews you've done previously and come up with something slightly different.
Okay.
And on that, I don't want to go too in depth into the fact that as you've mentioned, you are a teacher as well as being a professional wrestler. But I do want to touch on it slightly with a game I like to play with our guests called Rush Mount More, in name of Mount Rushmore. Where I'm going to give you 30 seconds to name your top 4 of something in no particular order. It's going to be something not too difficult, not too serious, but it will tie into the fact that you are an 8th grade history teacher. Okay. So I'd like you, Mr. Tim Storm, with 30 seconds. I'm doing this in the least professional way possible by just showing my phone to the camera.
Oh, you're fine. As long as I don't have to depend on my memory. I've been hitting the head a lot. I'll be okay.
Okay, so what are your top 4 in no particular order favorite subjects to teach in 8th grade history, favorite stories from history?
Oh, stories of history. I like American Revolution. I like I started to say Constitution. That's not true. Bill of Rights is always fun, good discussion. Let's go Civil War, and then we'll just talk about the presidents, because the first 6 or 8 presidents are all pretty interesting to me.
Interesting in how you did it in 30 seconds, by the way, which is for sometimes I've given people easier questions than that. They've not made it. It's a challenging thing to ask. Interesting in how they were presidents or how they were as people.
To me, how they were as people and how they got to the position of the presidency. You know, one of the things that I try to tell my students all the time is we can't look at these guys as perfect human beings. All of them were flawed in their own way. Some of them had incredibly great benefits, and some of them had some really bad things in their life. But I try to use that to say that's the way we are too. None of us are perfect, but they had the ability to either overcome those flaws or still get something really good being a flawed human. We're all flawed.
How often, if at all, because this is one of those facts that just stays in my head, does it come up that Abraham Lincoln was a wrestler?
Not often with me.
Okay.
Well, no, it's the only one, right, that we know of that had a historically knew he was a wrestler. But usually, truthfully, by that time at that point in our 8th grade year, we're getting toward the end, and they're ready for me to stop talking and move on with something else anyway. So
excellent. If you were to teach a story from wrestling history as part of the class, is there something that sticks out to you as an important moment that maybe even ties into the history of America that you'd like to teach the 8th graders about?
Wow. Okay. Boy, I'm going to mark out a little bit here. And I don't know that this answers your question, but it's what hits me when we talk about it. And there's real gray area there between reality of shoot and work and all those kind of things. But I'm a big fan of the American Dream, Dusty Rhodes, and not because of the American part, but you know, the story that he portrayed was the son of a plumber, somebody who came from a very poor background, very poor, and that's truthful, but became there were times when he was the best known professional wrestler in the world. And I look back at that because I was a fan then. I knew by the time I was in the 5th, 6th grade, 7th grade, whatever, I could tell you every Dusty Rhodes, you know, everything, the catchphrase that he said. And it never occurred to me that he wasn't a body guy. And now, I mean, again, today, I mean, as a school teacher, I have summers off. So I spent a lot of time falling into the rabbit hole of YouTube. And today I was looking at some Dusty Rhodes stuff and thinking, okay, never a body guy. But I never knew that. He was so good. He was so charismatic, and he was so good in the ring. Never occurred to me. So, I mean, I would tell my students, maximize your strengths, work hard, do what Dusty Rhodes said he did, overcome all that, son of a plumber, all those kind of things to become a world champion.
I think if you're teaching American history, the American Dream is quite an easy
start. It's a good transition there.
Speaking of good transitions, you're not just a historian of American history, and you're clearly a historian of professional wrestling, a sport that both of us are really appreciative of. Something you mentioned in passing in a previous interview that's really stuck with me is that you said you had a room full of VHS tapes behind you. How many do you think you have? Do you still have all these things, or have you moved on from them? Because you mentioned YouTube there, and suddenly my heart was in a panic.
Yeah.
We've got
no, and that's okay. I have a couple of huge crates full of them. Some of those I got from a friend of mine, and I was trying to clear some space, and I contacted him and said, okay, listen, I don't want to get rid of anything, but these are yours. And his response kind of caught me off guard. It's what you just said, though. His response was, I don't think there's anything in there that I can't find on YouTube, so hang on to them or do whatever you want with them. I can't, for the most part, I can't bring myself to get rid of them just because, but he's right. I mean, today my viewing was Arn Anderson and Bobby Eaton winning the NWA TV title. I mean, you know, you can find anything on YouTube, but yes, I couldn't get rid of all those tapes. I just can't. They probably don't even work anymore. Who knows? Oh,
I decided that my new thing this year was to start collecting tapes, and my boss at work very helpfully informed me 3 months in that the tapes will start to disintegrate in the next couple of years. I went, well, then why have I spent all this money?
Well, and then you get the point that how you store them depends on how they'll run, and if you store them standing up, then on the loop every time it loops. Anyway, yeah, you're right. You're right.
Are they all official, or are some of them ones that you've just recorded off the television?
I was not like you performed a miracle just getting me online today because my technology is so poor. I'm ignorant. So I probably did not do any of those myself. They were either official or somebody else did them and passed them on to me and or, you know, let me hang on to them. So yeah, I'm not going to say I couldn't press record on a VHS back in the day or VCR, but yeah, that's about the extent of my technological
prowess.
Yeah.
Which one do you watch most often? Is the one you come back to?
Like a particular match?
Yeah, or a particular tape, because I don't know if you've got specific matches recorded or if it's full length shows. Is there something that you find?
It's everything, and I've got a real good friend of mine, kind of become a traveling partner over the last 6 or 8 years. Is a guy named James Beard, who is a referee. My dog's going to start barking. I'm sorry.
That's fine.
But he gave me basically a DVD library of world-class videos. Because he was a booker at World Class, and I go to those a lot. Big Von Erich fan, and I truthfully the whole NWA thing that's not a work for me. It was what I looked at and thought, okay, this is professional wrestling. You know, this is what I love. So if I go back and I watch, I'm a big Arn Anderson guy. You know, a lot of people are Ric Flair fans, which is absolutely understandable, and one of the, you know, well, some would argue the best ever, but anything with the Four Horsemen, anything with, you know, that from that time period, for the most part, I was a big Mr. Wrestling 1 and 2 fan. So anything from that time period is what I go back to. And that's thus my episode today of, I saw something where Arn Anderson was talking about Bobby Eaton, and he, in his opinion, one of the top 5 best of all time. Which and Bobby and I became friends before over the last 6 or 8 years before he passed, and I had never thought of it in that context. I think he gets kind of pigeonholed as a tag team guy, but his single stuff was phenomenal, and you know, getting to know him and getting to learn from him and his sense of humor and those kind of things are just, you can't put a value on that.
Someone you touched on there that I was going to come to later on, but I think since you've already brought him up, it is a perfect time to, is James Beard, because that is a name I think to wrestling fans that aren't digging down as much, we might not hear the name James Beard.
Right.
You've brought him up in every interview. I've watched them all, and you've mentioned him in every single one. Just talk to me about, how much do you love the guy? Is he your best friend wrestling? How important is he to your career?
He is, well, I talked to him today. And he is absolutely, he and my tag team partner are probably my 2 best friends, period, but in wrestling for sure. And as far as the value, I give him a lot of credit for me being NWA world champion. Under the old ownership, under the old management group of NWA, he was the director of operations and personnel and all those kind of things. And I met him, got to know him, spent some time with him, started working with him, started traveling with him, doing seminar, all those kind of things. And I think he and a promoter on the Texas-Oklahoma border, and then of course the president of the NWA, well, and I better throw in the Jax Dane was the world champion. And I think he had to be comfortable working with me. He had to give the nod to that. Rob Conway, which was a big part of that at the time. All of those guys, you know, I'm sure at some point could have given the, you know, the no thing and it wouldn't have happened. But I give James a lot of credit for that happening.
I said earlier, I don't want to make sure I'm asking you questions you've not been asked before, but there's something
you're doing a great job of. You're making me think. I'm not good at thinking.
It is your summer holidays. I probably shouldn't be.
Oh no, it's all good. It's all good.
Well, this is going to be an easy one because this is just you telling a story. Because as much as I want to focus on things you've not spoken about before, I can't not ask you to tell me this again, which is about you seeing Andre the Giant versus Ken Patera.
Yeah. Okay, I have 2 stories, but one, I'll get to that one. My first wrestling memory was not that. But it was probably early 70s. I saw somebody do a mask gimmick and later on okay. That was my first wrestling memory. But I'm from Pine Bluff, Arkansas. I went to Pine Bluff Convention Center, And I look back at that now because the guys that were on the card, it was probably a Mid-South card, maybe a Georgia champ. I mean, it was that kind of combination of guys, but it was again a who's who of wrestling. I mean, I remember there was a coal miner's glove on a pole match, which, you know, at the time I didn't realize that was even a kind of funny to those guys. But it was Hacksaw, Butch Reed against Hacksaw, Jim Duggan, Battle of the Hacksaws. But it was all those guys I mentioned. Mr. Wrestling #2 was there. Great card, great show. And the main event was Ken Patera against Andre the Giant. And a friend of mine actually owns the light, but at the time, the look for wrestling shows, especially house shows, was a kettle light over the ring. So you had one light that basically lit the ring, and then it was dark all the way around it. And Ken Patera, and I don't remember much about the match itself, except of course when Andre walked into any building, any room, and he's what, seems like 3 foot higher than anybody in the crowd. So you could it's like a mountain moving across, and that's gets your attention. And for a kid, it's breathtaking. But the finish was a body slam, which today we look at that and go, what? But when he picked up Patera, who was legitimate Olympic, lifter, powerhouse, when he picked up Patera for the finish, his feet hit that kettlebell, the kettle light. And I don't believe that was planned. I don't think that's not something you go, it'd be really cool. That's just how big Andre was. So the light is swinging, and he pounds Patera, pins him for the 1, 2, 3. And I joke and say it was like angels singing, it was like, oh, so I was hooked immediately. And after the matches, I think they must have ended a little bit like, we didn't have a lot of money. So it would be like, drop me off and I'll pick you up at whatever time. So I still had 20 or 30 minutes. And I snuck into the ring, after everybody was gone, and stood on the second rope and raised my arms. And I won't say that I knew at that point it was going to happen, but yeah, the addiction was definitely set in at that point. I knew I wanted to do it.
That's become, again, I've done a couple of these interviews. I've watched all other ones before that, but that is my favorite story I've heard anyone tell about wrestling. I know you joke about the angels thing, but there's something so romanticized about that idea of the swaying light and this gigantic man. From that moment, did Andre become your favorite wrestler in the world, or was it just wrestling became your favorite thing?
He was bigger than wrestling. He was almost like a fictional character. It wasn't like he was, this is not me, spitting out things I've heard. He wasn't real. He was that big and that much bigger than everybody else that it wasn't real. I don't even think he was my favorite wrestler at the time because he wasn't real, and when I saw him, that even having however many years of watching and seeing on TV and all those kind of things, seeing him in real life was bigger than life. I was at that point very much an NWA fan. And, like I said, all those guys, Dusty Rhodes, I don't wrestle a lot for NWA TV, but I still do, but I wrestle a lot everywhere else. And I've gone over the last 2 or 3 years to my ode to Dusty Rhodes is the boots. I've gone to, the Dusty style boots over the last 2 or 3 years. And, I do a lot of Dusty stuff, and it is purely, when I'm talking about it, I may say I'm going to do the Dusty, and they know exactly what I'm talking about. So it's, Dusty Rhodes, Arn Anderson, Ric Flair, everybody loved the Road Warriors, their power. And if you watch, boy, I'm hesitant to say even my style of wrestling because I'm not sure I have any style. I'm a brawler, bruiser, like a lot of those guys that I mentioned. I love Terry Funk. Those guys. And again, not taking anything away from their wrestling ability, they were amazing. But that was my preference, and it's still my preference now.
Excellent. Someone you mentioned that was on that show was Hacksaw Butch Reed, who I believe you then later faced in Harley Race's promotion, World League Wrestling. How did it feel to be able to be across the ring from someone that you'd seen at your first live wrestling show?
It hurt really bad.
I don't know if you mean physically or the emotion of seeing him.
Physically, it hurt really bad. I was so out of my league. obviously. I mean, he was, I don't know if people know, but if you go back and look up Hacksaw Butch Reed, he was a legitimate tough guy. He was a body guy before body guys. He was a bull rider, bull roper, bull wrestler. Yeah, it was, I'm not going to tell the story because I've since learned it's probably not as positive as I want it to be, but you know, it was, he beat the crap out of me. And it wasn't unsafe. It was what needed to happen when you get a veteran like that in the ring, with a guy who basically, I don't want to say I didn't know what I was doing, but it was very much in the learning phase at 33 years old. You know, I didn't start till I was 32. So it was one of my first 5 or 6 real matches. And yeah, it hurt a lot. I mean, I remember thinking, okay, that's why it looks so rough. Cause it is exactly what it's supposed to be.
One of your other early matches was your first challenge at the NWA World's Heavyweight Championship against Dan Severn. What did you learn from that match, or is it just more pain?
No, Dan was, we all know this, I think. Dan Severn is legit. I mean, he, with his MMA titles and all of that, but he's also one of the nicest guys I've ever met. I think a lot of times the wrestling the MMA didn't translate with Dan for the wrestling. Again, it was, I remember at that time when they told me that I was going to be facing Dan Severn for the NWA World title at the time, there were a lot of guys that in the promotion, because it was not a big promotion, but I specifically remember a lot of guys were not happy that I was the one that was getting to face him, because I was green, I was inexperienced. But in the reality was not any of that. It was, I'm a fairly big guy. And at the time I was bigger than I am now. I mean, I've worked really hard to not be as big, but they were trying to find a matchup, you know, that would at least offer Dan Severn, you know, I don't want to say a contest, because the reality was I was out of my league. But I look back now and I look at those things, and I got to wrestle Dan a couple of times after that, and they were all much better. And, you know, there was even 3 or 4 years ago, it was even thrown around the idea of Dan and I doing some tag work for the NWA as an older tag. So, I mean, yeah, it was, you know, you look back at all those things, and it's good experience that brings you to where you are today. I don't know if I've told this story, but it's, you know, the guy that trained me told me it's going to take you 7 years to kind of get to really understand what's going on. And I remember at the time, ex-football player, again, 32, 33 years old. I had done a lot of athletic stuff. And I remember, I mean, I looked him in the eyes and went, okay, thank you, sir. But really what I was thinking was, yeah, right. Because I'd been okay. I'd done well at everything I tried to do. And I remember at 2 years in the business going, all right, I didn't know, but I got it now. And then I remember at like 5 years in the business going, you know what, he was right. I still don't know a lot. And I didn't know anything at 2 years. And then at the 7-year mark going, okay, I'm still working on it. And now whatever it is, because I don't even know when I started officially, but 25, 26 years later, I'm still learning. And I think if you ever get to the point where you stop learning, you're backing up. One of my friends told me a good analogy this weekend, and I was like, that's perfect. And I learned something, you know, I mean, it's a constant progression.
Was that an analogy about wrestling, or just a life analogy?
Oh, it was an analogy about wrestling. Okay. And we were having the discussion about crowd response. And I made the comment that I like crowd interaction, and I like to feel the crowd. You know, I like to feel the buzz of the crowd. And then if there's no buzz, then I'm searching to figure out what do I need to change to, you know, what's going on. And his name is Jerome. And Jerome said, I've just been told this one, and I don't want to, I'm not going to use his name. I don't know. He wouldn't not appreciate it, but he's also under contract somewhere. And he said, I was just told this. And, you know, he's always looked at me as somebody who's helped him. And he said, let me pass this on. Maybe you can use it. He said, imagine that you're sitting in traffic and you're just not moving. And he said, it's not that nothing's happening. He says, because while you're sitting there, you can feel your tension and your frustration build. And he said, it doesn't matter how long you sit there. When you finally, he said, even if you can accelerate for 30 feet, you feel like you've done something, and then you have to stop again. He said, but when you finally get done and you break out of that traffic and just let loose, that's when you get that feeling. And that's wrestling. If you get to that point where the crowd is, well, James Beard told me a story about Dick Murdoch. And he said he had one of Dick Murdoch's last matches. And he said, Dick grabbed a headlock and he worked a headlock for 20 minutes. And the crowd started chanting, "This is boring." The crowd was saying, do something. They were booing him. And about 15 minutes into the match, eventually he lost to a roll up from a headlock, and the crowd went nuts. And his response was, "I'm not going to let them call my match for me." And he got the response he wanted, even though they didn't like what they were seeing for 15 minutes. I don't know. It's a constant learning for me.
Of course. I like that you mentioned your friend Jerome there passing something up to you because you've helped him out in the past. Do you feel like at this stage in your career, as you say, 25, 26 years in, do you now have a collection, might be the wrong word, but there are a group of guys who have come up after you that are now seeing you as a mentor figure that they want to help out still?
Absolutely. I mean, and that's been hard for me to accept, to be honest with you. I'll have somebody say, "Hey, did you watch my match?" And in most cases, I won't say a word to someone unless they've asked me to. And it's not that I just think, well, why would they care what I think? And I've got to get past that. Another one of my friends, and again, I know he won't mind me using his name, but Lance Hoyt is a guy that I traveled with a lot at one point, and he's the best at helping guys develop. I mean, everybody, and he'll say, "Here's what I saw. You might want to do." And he did that while we were traveling, and I need to get better at that. James and I joke all the time that we're to the point where what we have left is passing on what we have that people passed on to us. And, I got to be careful because I have legitimately been saying this for 18 years. I don't know how much time I have left, but at 40, I thought I was done.
Yeah.
I'm 58 now. So I don't know how much time I have left, and I need to do a better job of making sure I'm passing whatever it is that I've got that I know down to guys that can use it and will use it.
On travel partners, etc. You've said before that the camaraderie of wrestling is missing slightly because you're not traveling with people as much as people used to. You can hop on a flight alone, you get to sit, you don't need to drive there. How does that compare to the locker room atmosphere as it's changed in your career? Because I sense, I could be wrong, but I feel like in the last 25, 26 years, it might have been the locker atmosphere becomes more welcoming. It might be that that's not the case. How do those two things compare?
I think that as far as the locker room setting, it's going to vary based on promotion. I think for the most, I know that I'm considered a good locker room guy. I have a calming influence. I'm going to try to help people, but I can also go into a locker room where it's not a good setting. That's one of the, and I've probably said this before, but that's one of the positive things about the NWA. We have our little, all of us, you have your friends that you hang out with. And, we kind of laugh because it's the NWA locker room, and the NWA has become almost a rebirth for a lot of guys. And it's a collect, many of them are guys who were done. I'm out of wrestling. I'm so burned out. I'm so bitter. And they come into the NWA locker room and it's so welcoming, and everybody's trying to help each other. And everybody wants to, you have very few guys who are trying to just get themselves over. We're trying to get the promotion over. We're trying to get each other over. And that's how you get successful. But that varies from locker room to locker room. You get people together, you're going to have different chemistries. And our NWA locker room, the chemistry changes because there are guys coming in and out. There are guys who, whatever, injury, other booking, whatever. But the core group of our guys is just, and I should be careful, guys and girls, because our female roster is amazing. It's just a great place to be.
What's something that you would learn traveling on the road in wrestling that you would never learn in a wrestling school?
And I'll use all the examples that I kind of the people that I just used, because I can use that specifically. I worked for a promotion in Arkansas called TCW, which phenomenal roster, phenomenal locker room, talent, great production. And it's actually where I kind of became friends with James, but it's also where Lance and I traveled together. And here's what you get on the road. Just think about this for a second. If you get Lance, myself, James in the car, and I just everybody's had their job and done their job, and we're heading back home after a 2 or 3 day loop. But I was able to get in the car and have somebody say, all right, when you did this right here, what was the situation? What were you thinking? Did you think about this? Or why'd you do this? At the time, this is very specific. It was, hey, you're our world champion, you're our champion. So why would you do that for this guy? And just, again, I don't want to be a name dropper, but my response was, that was Tommy Dreamer. And the response was, but you're our champion. I understand you're being respectful, but you're our champion. You don't get that in a train, when you go to your training facility and you're learning how to whatever, you don't get that in-depth psychology. And I was able to, for years and years and years with different guys, to get immediate input, immediate feedback, discussion. And it wasn't just me, it's all of us, because that's what I say is missing. Go back and listen to some of those road stories. If you were running Memphis and you had 5 nights and twice on Sunday, and TV on Saturday and another show but you were riding with the same guys, for the most part, what you talked was wrestling, because that's what you share. And you have to love this stuff. You have to have a passion for it. You can't be successful. You can't stick with it. So you would say, hey, you did this here. Did you think about, have you ever tried this next time? Or some guy gets knocked out and you're 3 minutes into a 12-minute match. What do you do? And that's where you learn. You don't learn if somebody gets knocked out when you're training. Well, you pull them off to the side and the next group gets in and you make sure they're okay, but you can't do that in a match. So it's just a constant feedback loop from everybody in the car. And it's unfortunate from a learning aspect. I'm sure life is 100 times easier to jump on a plane and go wherever you're going than it was then, to spend your life in a car. What Steve Austin or Stone Cold always talks about, eating potatoes, raw potatoes, because that's all he could afford on the road. And I mean, that's a tough life, but it's also a great place to learn.
Someone that you didn't mention there, but you have mentioned in previous interviews, that you traveled with, that you learned from. You said that he took you under his wing and you watched tape together, but I've not heard you sort of explain anything that you've learned from the guy. So what did you learn from Jake the Snake Roberts?
Maybe one of the best promo guys. No, one of the best promo guys in the history of wrestling. And his psychology, and you go back and watch his stuff. I remember he pulled me over pulled me off to the side of a show, and he told me what. Now I look at it and I go, it's Jake Roberts 101. And his whole thing was, you don't have to raise your voice to get people's attention. If you use a very low, people will lean in because they want to listen. And then when you get to a point where you want to, and he would emphasize that, but and it's almost a cliche. Allison Kay did a thing one time as kind of a joke, as a running thing, that it was like, here's how you cut a wrestling promo. You run your hands together and talk in a gruff voice, brother. Everybody goes to wrestler voice and wrestler mode. And yeah, there's 2 of them actually.
Special guest on the show.
There's 2 of them and they look just alike. So I don't think I can pick them. But we all kind of go to that place. And I told somebody the other day that when I got to put it down because the other one wants up to. Here's when I learned to cut promos. Stop cutting promos. Just be yourself, because that's, if you're sincere, if you're passionate, if you let your true emotion and your true passion come through, that's when you connect with people. Because if all of us are doing this, brother, and I'm not taking away from anybody, but if everybody does the same thing, there's no individuality and there's no connection. Billy told me one time after a promo, he goes, I got to be honest with you, I don't know where Tim Storm stops and Tim Scoggins takes over. I can't tell the difference. And my answer was, that's funny, because neither can I, because they're, in a lot of cases, they're the exact same person. Not 100%, right? I mean, it's wrestling. You can't do it 100%, but that's when I found my way to be successful in cutting promos. Stop trying to cut promos.
That sounds like a mixture of learning from your love of Dusty and this information from Jake to be unique, but also to be yourself.
Yeah, 100%. And it's it's different for everybody, and not everybody has a gift to do that, but everybody can develop and get better at whatever, in wrestling, we have certain cards that you're dealt, and there's some things you can't do about it, some things you can. And it comes down to your dedication, your passion, how hard are you willing to work. Be really careful how I say this. It's like, to me, to be a professional wrestler, you need to be a professional. And there's a lot of parts to that. Do what you say you're going to do. Be a man of your word. Show up when you're supposed to show up. When you show up, be professional in how you act. And but it's also, this is the one that gets people when they kind of gets a little what people hate to hear is the truth that they know is the truth. And when I'm doing a seminar, what I will tell people is there's a lot of things you can't control. And maybe genetically there's certain things that you have limitations on, but you can control what you eat, how hard you work in the gym, and you can look like a professional wrestler. Don't play professional wrestler, and again, there's all body types. There's a place for everybody, but be professional, look professional, act professional. You can do that.
On that difficulty differentiating Tim Storm from Tim Scoggins, does that make it hard to not bring work home with you sometimes? Or are you personally quite good at differentiating when this is wrestling time, this is personal time?
It's not really difficult for me. I don't always like what's going on in wrestling, in my wrestling world. There might be things I would change for me personally, but I also, at least in my opinion, I have a very, very clear view that it's not all about me. As a commentator, for example, your job as a commentator is not to get yourself over. It's to get the people that are in the ring over. That's your job. Make them look as good as you, whatever they're doing. Don't put the focus on you. And I really have to, because I'm a teacher, I have a self-editing button that's going on constantly in my head. Very few words come out of my mouth that aren't, and it's not something I think about. It's, as a teacher, you have to be very careful in today's world what you say and how you say it. The same thing if I'm doing commentary. But that's part of it. You have to get the other person over. So when I come home from wrestling, maybe I would have liked to beat somebody that particular night. Maybe I didn't want to lose the world title. I'm not saying I didn't, but but it doesn't matter.
I think at this stage you're allowed to say you didn't want to lose.
Well, I never, and I said this from the beginning. I said I would be happy being 80 years old and still being the world champion if that were possible. But it's not possible, and it's not the business, right? You don't ever want to, but you do what's best for the promotion. You do what's best for business. You do what is best for TV. You do what's best to make for the company make money. It's just the way it is. That's the way it should be. Not everybody approaches it that way, but that's also why we have a group of men and women that in NWA that, for the most part, that's the attitude, and it's one of the reasons why we have a good product.
On just our jokey conversation there about holding the belt until you're 80. What's more important in wrestling, more title reigns or longer title reigns?
In my opinion, for a title to mean something, it's longer. It can be something, and again, in my opinion, there's a ton of people that'll disagree with this, but it's okay. It's my opinion. If you have a monthly change, and I have been and still am part of a promotion where it was a ministry driven wrestling program instead of a wrestling program. Well, the title belt was used as a prop for that particular show, but because of that title didn't mean anything. Now, maybe to the 200 people watching, they don't know that, but if you want your title to be taken seriously, if you believe, it still is today in the NWA. If you win any title in the NWA, it's a reward for your hard work, and it's because you're the one that's gonna bring people in to watch. You're the one that they're drawn to one way or another, love you or hate you. But if you do a title change every 3 weeks, eventually that title means nothing.
Talking about the NWA a little bit more now, who's your, or maybe this won't be talking about the NWA, but I just think this might be where it goes. If you look at your career, who would you call your career rival? Because I think instinctively fans end up going, well, it's Nick Aldis because it's the biggest moments and the most well-known things. But is there someone else?
No, I think again, I say this, I'm Mr. Honesty. When William Patrick Corrigan bought the NWA, here's what he bought. The letters, the NWA, he bought the National Wrestling Alliance. He didn't buy a ring. He didn't buy aprons. He didn't buy posters. He bought that name and the history that came with it. And along with that, those title belts, which I think probably have all been replaced and, upgraded with newer versions and those kind of things. So our roster consisted of me and Nick Aldis. That was our entire roster. And then Josephus came in, right? And those three became tied together. And it has been, I mean, obviously now at the last TV taping, I mean, there had to, at one point on our talent meeting, there had to have been 70 or 80 people there. And I mean, obviously it continues to grow and all of those kind of things, but I think it would be, it would be an inaccuracy. And I've had a lot of great, feuds with people, but nobody knew outside of Texas, Arkansas, Louisiana, Mississippi, Oklahoma, right, the South. Nobody knew. Nobody knew who Tim Storm was outside of my area until Billy Corrigan bought the NWA. The 10 Pounds of Gold episode started airing. People started kind of connecting a little bit, and then that grew, and then now it's grown into this. I watched NWA Power right before we talked, and they announced. Maybe I shouldn't. Well, I guess people should have seen it by now if you're going to see it.
Yeah, well, this interview will come out next Friday. So
okay, well, they announced. This is where Tim Scoggins and Tim Storm are the same person, because this actually becomes emotional for me. They lifted the ban, the stipulation that the original night of NWA Power, when I lost to Nick Aldis, that I couldn't. See, I'm getting emotional now. Isn't that stupid? But that I could actually fight for the NWA World Title again. And then they announced the tournament, which is me against Nick Aldis, is the first round. So,
if it makes you feel any better, you're not the only one getting emotional at that.
Well, it's like it's kind of one of those deals where what's a work and what's a shoot, and I knew that they were. I'm part of the production team, and as far for commentary, like I have, so I knew an announcement was coming, and I kind of knew what it was about. But when they came to me, and you can't say it's live because it's being taped, but when they came to me, I mean, this is what I did, and it's not an act. It's real emotion, which the irony there is, it's professional wrestling. We know what we kind of know the storyline, so, but it's that real to me, and it's that important to me. And I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing, but it is what it is. It is that important to me.
What's the phrase? It's real to me, damn it.
Yeah. Dave, that's his name, Dave.
Right. Yeah, that's totally thrown me, because I just want to talk about that for the rest of our time.
We can talk about it.
I mean, I've got questions written down. I don't know. It's that the first episode of Power, to very quickly talk about my relationship with wrestling, is getting back into it in 2018. So the first episode of Power, and you've heard this so many times, the Mama Storm's Baby Boy promo and the match and the outcome and all those things is one of my favorite moments since getting back into wrestling, because it's such a true and honest and you. And that's totally stunned me, because I'm very excited about the prospect. So you've sold a pay-per-view.
Well, I'm not saying that's the pay-per-view. That's
no, of course.
But it's a tournament to determine who will face Trevor Murdoch at NWA 74. And I think that's going to be I don't think it's going to be a 2-night pay-per-view, but it's going to be 2 events in St. Louis last weekend of August. And I don't know, man. It's that night. I had a little apprehension going into that match. And I mean this 100%. I all on me. I think that the original match that Nick and I had at Championship Wrestling from Hollywood, I was not happy with the match because I didn't feel like I did as well as I could have done. You know, and I've told, I don't know that I've told this story publicly, but I've be careful how I say this because karma will get you. I don't get tired. I still don't. I don't blow up in the ring. I don't get nervous ever. And that night going into it, things were happening physiologically that I couldn't explain. And turns out I was nervous and didn't know it. It had been so long since I was nervous. I didn't know what that felt like. And I did not, I mean, the match I've watched it over and over, and the match was fine, but I'm also my worst critic and I could have done a ton better. So going in, when they approached me and said, here's what we'd like to do. We'd like to do you and Nick, first episode of Power. We want to introduce the world. We want to make the tie-in, but we're going to make this for you can never face the champion again. And now people have said for however many years, that was 2018. Is that what you said? So 4 years ago?
I don't want to do the maths.
I think that
every interview okay. I've seen since you lost the belt, it has been asked, will you ever challenge again?
Right.
So
every single answer has been, I am a man of my word. That's the stipulation that was put in. I agreed to the stipulation and I did not win the match. And everybody's response is, yeah, but it's professional wrestling. Right. Tonight, when I watched NWA Power, when you watch that, what you will hear me say is, I agreed to that stipulation and I have followed through with that stipulation. If that's lifted, that is not something I would politic for. That's not me. And back to kind of finish the story, William Patrick Corey came out to make an announcement and then kind of threw that as a tag, and they came to me live and I had to respond to that. And you will hear me say exactly what we just talked about, which is I agreed to that stipulation. So, I still shake my head about how emotional I can get over something that technically I know is coming in some way. I just don't know how it's presented. And I think sometimes they know that because they know how emotional I can get about what I care about.
They know that and they hide things from you on purpose.
Like I said, I knew that it was coming. I just didn't know how it was coming. And, I don't know. It's good stuff.
I'll ask then, because we're talking about all championships, etc. When you were in Japan defending the NWA World Championship, you were on the same card as Road Warrior Animal, who was working as a manager. And you've mentioned he was a favorite growing up and he's someone everyone thinks about. What was it like sharing a locker room with him? And was there any lessons you learned there?
Well, what we are taught, especially if you're an old school guy, is that when you go into a locker room, you go over the top in being respectful for people in the locker room. And that means that you go over and you say hello and you introduce yourself, but you're not going to take up their time or anything like that. Very gracious in general, but 2 years ago, we got involved in actually kind of the coming out of during and then coming out of COVID with a promotion here in Texas that he became a really big part of. And I, here's what I will say it, we became friends, but here's the greatness to him is that he befriended a lot of people. And he legitimately believed and made us feel, because it's true, that he cared about us and that he would help us. And he did. And he would try to grow talent. And we got along great. Sharing a locker room was great, but becoming his friend, it was an honor. Like you said, for somebody that I idolized. I mean, those two guys were, no pun intended, they were animals and they destroyed people and just left a trail of destruction, literally, legitimately in their path. So to get to know him later, I've been so fortunate to get to know a lot of great people that, I watch this stuff on YouTube or whatever now, and I'm like, how am I friends with this guy now? You know, I grew up idolizing, and here the irony of the funny part in my head is like, they're only 3 years older than me. You know what I'm saying? It's like, you know, anyway, it's a weird deal.
No, I understand it. It's, yeah, I think a lot of people feel the same way sometimes of learning the people that you look up to aren't so different from you, and getting to form friendships, lifelong friendships with people that you never thought you'd even meet is a blessed experience.
Well, you know, you've heard that about be careful meeting your meeting your idols, because they'll let you down. And in the most part, they haven't. You know, most of the guys that I've met that I idolized, you know, that I've mentioned here, and a lot of others, just as great of people as they were wrestlers.
Excellent. I want to dial it back slightly to the 10 pounds of gold series, to the fact that you said that you were hesitant to share the world with your story, share your story with the world. This is the 1 a.m. talking. No. Sharing Mama Storm, sharing Tim Scoggins. How would you have defined the character of Tim Storm before sharing that information with the world? How would you have defined yourself prior to that?
What you see is what you get. It just is. It didn't define me. It only let people see who I was. I was the same person. I just, you know, and I won't go into all the detail, but it's, you know, I was, you don't let people see who you are, and you don't let fans see who you are as a person. You let them see who you want them to see as a wrestler. So you didn't let them know you were a teacher, or you had grandkids, or that you were in your 50s, or any of those things, right? I mean, we all wanted the idea that we showed up in a limousine and made millions of dollars, and that, you know, so the thing that they had to overcome with me is breaking what I consider tradition, not breaking and showing the world who I am, because I am who, I mean, literally, I am. What you see is what you get for the most part. You know, so nothing changed. My character was the same then as it is now, for that matter, that it was before I started wrestling.
Yeah. And do you feel comfortable being called an NWA star yet? Will you ever feel comfortable with that?
I have a tendency to.
Short answer, now the long answer.
It was like, when I say star, in my mind, what I'm picturing is all those guys we've talked about. And while I've held the NWA world title, I held it for over a year, and all those kind of things. I still would never. How can I, for a millisecond, say I'm a star like Ric Flair, or Dusty Rhodes, or Sting, or Ricky Steamboat, or the Road Warrior? You know, you had Harley Race. How can many of us today, how can we put ourselves on that same level? And to me, that's what that was stardom in my mind. I say it all the time to my friends. I am who I am. It's, you know, what you see is what you get. And that's, I would never put myself on that level. And it still surprises me if somebody knows who I am. I was in a bank doing business for my mother 2 weeks ago with a cousin of mine, and somebody came up, started talking to me, and she never stopped talking about it because she thought it was hilarious. You know, that they came, I mean, the guy lost his way to his car while talking to me, because, I mean, and she's like, because that's not who I am. I'm just me. So it still cracks me up. I don't get it.
Of course. I want to ask you about your annual wrestling review. I think that's something quite unique that I don't think enough wrestlers. Actually, sorry, before that, there was something that was on my mind that I wanted to say.
Okay.
Because you've said it in other interviews that no one can take the fact that your name is on a list of nearing 60 people that have held that belt. That's how you can, for a millisecond, think your name is that close. Because of the tens of thousands of people that have stepped through the ropes, there's only close to 60 people who can say they've been NWA World Heavyweight Champion, and you're on that list. And that's why you get the right to say that. So hopefully put your mind at ease slightly.
That's why other people have the right to say that. I can't say that.
Plausible deniability. It's good. So sorry, when it comes to your annual wrestling review, for those that haven't heard these interviews, but we do have a playlist on All Angles Wrestling where you can see all the interviews we've watched to prepare for this one with Tim. You've said that every year you take stock of who you are as a wrestler, of how you perform in ring, and you've done that since you started. What do you think about when you're doing those reviews? What are the most important things to address?
Forever, it has been three things. And I tell young guys this that are, you know, I don't know that I like the term indies, but that are working their way up and trying to look for opportunities. I say for me, it always was three things. I have to stay healthy, especially at my age, because one major injury, the recovery time puts me out career-wise, right? I mean, if I have a surgery that's going to take 6 months of recovery, I'm 60 years old and it's done, right? I mean, it's just over. I've got to keep having fun. And I can't get to the point where I'm losing money doing it because I have a responsibility. Today, as it sits, as I look at this, well, back to my buddy James Beard, we have an ongoing joke that we are trying to determine who's going to. It's a constant race to either the rocking chair or the wheelchair. And not to get into any detail, but I mean, I'm 58. I'll be 59. And I said this 3 years ago. My body's breaking down. It just is. It's just what happens. No matter how hard you work in the gym, no matter how you watch what you eat, you know, I never want to stop. That's the weird thing. But I also have to, and I haven't found it yet. And I'm afraid I'm going to miss it. I'm just being, again, I'm being transparent. I'm afraid that I'm going to go too long. I never want to embarrass the business. Never want to embarrass myself. I don't want to be that guy who held on too long. And, you know, fans, everybody has a right to their opinion. I try not to read anything, to be truthful, because, you know, I read something one day about a match on NWA TV, and somebody just made the comment that, you know, why is this guy still wrestling? Well, I was watching the match going, okay, this is going pretty good, but it's all opinion, so it's okay, right? But I never want to get to that point where I waited too long. And at some point, the balance, you know, the balance between benefit and pain is pain's gonna win out at some point. But I'm gonna fight it as long as I can, because I love doing it. I love being in the ring. I mean, I wrestled Saturday night and, well, every weekend, it seems like Saturday night, Friday night and Saturday night. And there's nothing like that. I don't know. It's that feeling of coming out of a match going, wow, that was really good. You know, and they're not all that way. That's the thing. Is if Saturday night I wrestled a guy that I've known for four, I think, well, the promo that I cut, I had met him 4 years ago. He's listened to every bit of advice I've ever given him. He's applied it. He's gotten opportunities. He's still hunting, and we got to go out and just tear it up. And that just amazing sense of euphoria at the end of the night when you go, that was really good. You know, I've been on a Mick Foley I've been watching a lot of his stuff lately, and one of the favorite things that he says, and he says in his book too, he talks about one particular match where he said he stood up, and as he started his slow turn, he could see everybody in the arena stand up with him. And somebody said, you know, what was the highest point of your career? And he said, it just happened. And they said, what was the lowest point? And he said, the fear that it'll never happen again. That's wrestling.
Is that how you're taking every moment then going forward?
Oh,
every big moment is the biggest moment.
I enjoy even the little moments, you know, every time I get to swing my feet through those ropes and get to perform and entertain and compete, because no matter what anybody says, it's a competition. You know, I mean, it's me against myself. It's me against that person who, you know, I'm a very self-deprecating person as far as telling people, here's what we need to, just can't, you know, got to do this, whatever. And I'm having to stop doing that, because I don't want to set lower expectations, but I want to be realistic. So anyway, my process right now is, what's the balance? And the great thing for me is I've moved into the commentary part too. So it's, you know, you hear pro football players, pro baseball players say that the wrestlers that say the thing that they miss the most when it's over, when it's gone, is the guys, you know, get to hang out in the locker rooms. I'm getting to do that even if I don't wrestle, you know, and I am getting to wrestle still. I mean, still getting to on NWA. So that's a great thing.
Awesome. I don't have any answer for that other than awesome. That's great. Great to hear. You mentioned that you have responsibilities when it comes to being to making money for your family. So I want to finish on something that I think is so important and key to who you are as a person, which is family. And I want to start with someone we've already mentioned, which is Mama Storm. First of all, how is she doing?
She's doing okay. 97, approaching 98. For the first time ever, she's starting to show her age. yeah, I will get emotional, so I won't.
Okay.
Yeah, her, that's just part of it. Her memory is starting to go, her health's starting to fail a little bit. But she'll probably outlive us all. So it's, she's just as incredible as she was 4 or 5 years ago when I brought her up the first time. She's an amazing lady. I was there 2 weeks ago and spent 2 or 3 days with her, and then upset her by leaving to go wrestle on Saturday and coming back and then leaving to go wrestle on Sunday. And, yeah, she's amazing. Thank you for asking.
What would you attribute her longevity to? Because 98 is an amazing age.
Hard work, good life decisions. I've really patterned a lot of myself after her because she's the example that I had. We're not alike in the fact that there's nothing that makes me happier than to sit in this recliner back here with the dogs in my lap and watch, NWA wrestling. But she can't do that. She'll sit and then she says, well, I've got to get up. I've got to move around. And at 98, 97, 98, she's up. She fell in the yard the other day picking up limbs. I'm just saying, why are you picking up limbs at 97 years old? But she's got to go do something. She's working, she's moving. So yeah, that's where her health comes from. Good decisions, and she just never stops moving.
She also isn't, I'm assuming for 26 years, hasn't been a fan of you wrestling.
No.
Has she ever seen you wrestle at all?
We just talked about this, and there's so many jokes that jump into my head. No, she's, how about this? She has attended 3 matches. And here's what
like this.
And that's what leads to my jokes. It's like, yes, every one of them was like this, which is about 90% of anybody who's ever watched one of my matches does the same thing. So yeah, she says, I can't watch my baby. He might get hurt. I can't watch my baby get hurt. So, hey, that whole Mama Storm's baby boy is 100% real. I am a mama's boy, and I will be forever. So just the way it is.
Moving from your own mother to your own children, how did your kids feel when you started wrestling?
They thought it was extremely cool when I started. Went to a lot of early matches, especially, the family still support me. I think on one of the 10 Pounds of Gold episodes, my daughter asked me, Dad, do you want to be a grandfather that wrestles? And I went, absolutely, I do. So I saved for a couple of years because I think the shine wore off pretty quick. My daughter actually, we are doing, I guess I'll be very careful how I say this. Where we are currently doing our TV tapings is in the same large major city that my daughter lives and works along with her family. And she'll probably come out and support just for the fun of it before I'm done, if she knows I'm wrestling. So
how do they feel now that you've done it for half of your life?
Now it's just what Dad does. Really, it's like, it's one of those, my daughter will say that it's, how you do like 2 truths and a lie when you're getting, when you're at parties, I'm her truth that nobody ever gets. My dad is a former NWA World's Heavyweight champion. And knowing her as an editor of a major publication, nobody thinks that she's from a background of that. So, but they've always been supportive. I don't mean this in a bad way at all. It's really cool when it's convenient for it to be cool. And the rest of the time, they just don't talk about it. So put it that way.
And what about you? You said off the top, one of your greatest achievements is having 6 grandkids. How do the grandkids feel? Are any of them, I don't know what ages, are any of them old enough to understand what granddad does?
I'm going to get it wrong if I start doing ages, but it's something like I have 2 kids, both have 3 kids. So I have 6 grandkids. And I believe it's 8, 6 for the other, 5, 4, 2, and not a year. Like if that adds up to 6. And somebody right now is going to go back and replay that and see if I did it right. If I did it right, that's pretty much, let me see if I can do this real quick without messing this up. Back there is the only wrestling I've got, and there are some pictures and things. My granddaughter asked me the other day why I had a picture of myself in my underwear. there's there's my grandkids understanding of what Papa Storm is, what they call me, but
Okay.
what Papa Storm does. Why are
Okay.
you, Papa Storm, why are you wearing your underwear? And then she just laughed like it was the funniest thing in the world. So
Okay. I think this is slightly tied to family because it's such a serious topic, and I won't end on this, but it will be one of our last questions. You're one of the only people I've heard describe what it feels like to have a stinger in the ring. And you said that when you had your first one, you were convinced you were paralyzed.
I was paralyzed.
You were.
I was.
What goes through your head in that moment?
For me, at the time, I was actually wrestling for the NWA North American title. And I can't remember, because I held that a couple of times, and I can't remember if I was defending it or trying to win it. James was the referee. And as many people know, the referee will come over and check on you. And it's usually a very cursory, "Are you okay?" And he said, "Are you okay?" And I said, "No, I can't move my legs." And my only thought at that point was, how am I going to support my family?
And to tie that in, I know that you said in other interviews that your father sadly suffered a stroke when you were 11. Did something like that cross your mind as well?
It's not from the standpoint, my children are grown, right? So I was 11, and my dad never fully recovered, mentally or physically, from that. But I was very fortunate that for the most part, I didn't get serious about pursuing wrestling until my kids graduated from high school. It doesn't mean I didn't wrestle, but I don't think I missed a high school football practice or game for 10 years. I mean, well, high school's 3 years, but 10 years of and I only missed one of my daughter's productions because I was wrestling in Africa. So all of those things, I didn't miss much. And once they were out, college, whatever, now I can go, okay, well, now let's see what happens now. So I don't think I thought I'm going to be like my dad, but that's just part of wrestling. I haven't said this publicly, and I'm not going to go into any detail at all because that's not the business. But I think all of us in professional wrestling have had concussions, and potentially dozens of them, and we just don't do anything about it. But I had 6 or 8 months ago, I had a life-changing concussion, to the point where I told myself, if that happens again, I'm done. I can't. It changes who you are, changes your physically, it changes your personality, and I can't do that to my family either. So hey, I can be a commentator if that happens again. So it's just part of the business. It's one of the big sayings that you hear people say all the time is, it's not ballet. You don't go out there and it's not a dance. I don't care what anybody says. It's very physical. It's very real. It's brutal on your body. It is what it is, and it's addictive, and I love it, and I never want to stop doing it.
That's a great soundbite, and I would love to end on that, but I feel like I need to ask one more question just so we don't end on a complete on the most negative question I've asked. So this is just going to be the lowest, the slowest of slow bowls I can give you.
Okay.
And we'll end on your favorite thing in the world, which is the NWA World Heavyweight Championship. Talk to me about the difference in championship mentality between holding that belt and holding any other promotion's belt.
I think that anytime any promotion of any size believes in you enough to place that on you, that you need to take it seriously, and you need to approach it that way. And I even had to give myself a talk 2 or 3 years ago, to say, I need to make sure that I am giving this the same seriousness as I did the NWA title. But it's a difference in the grandfather of all titles and every other title. And I mean that. There are people right now in other promotions out there that their title is incredibly valuable, and they would say that the NWA title is dated and old and whatever. But the NWA World's Heavyweight title, every other title came from that. And yes, people can argue it and they can try to nitpick it and all that, but that's just the fact. That's just what it is. And if you grow up a student of the history of professional wrestling and you love it like I love it, you can't look at that list of NWA champions, Luthez all the way down to Trevor Murdoch and everyone in between, whether you like them or don't like them. And you can't look at that and say, it's an honor to be a part of that company and that list. And because it is so, in my opinion, again, so prestigious, it is above every other title.
And I think that is a great place to stop, Ben, on your favorite topic. So thank you very much to Mr. Tim Storm for joining me on All Angles Wrestling. Speak to the people at home. Where can they find you? Where should we be looking for you? Where's the most important place to find NWA?
Well, again, I'm going to not be a self-promoter much. Real Tim Storm, Twitter, Tim Storm 01 on Instagram, but the important one, NWA, Tuesday nights, Fight TV, 605, NWA Power, Saturdays, NWA. Here, self-promotion. I'm the co-managing director of NWA USA every Saturday. And it is I've said this before anybody else said it, wrestling the way it's supposed to be. It is hard hitting. It's got some humor. It's well done. It's great production. It is professional wrestling. Watch us on NWA.
Well, thank you very much for being here. And thank you very much to everyone watching at home. I hope you have a wonderful evening.
Thank you. You too.
Thank you for checking out All Angles Wrestling. You can catch more of us on Twitter at All Angles Rest. If you're listening to us in podcast form, remember you can check out our YouTube channel for exclusive clips and more interviews. And if you're here on our YouTube account, you can always catch us on the go by looking up our podcast on your favorite podcasting app. Thank you for checking out All Angles Wrestling. We'll see you next time.